Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name's Josh Hodges. I'm the host of Online with an Architect. Very happy to have Anthony Higgins from VMware here with us today to talk about the Azure VMware Solution. Welcome, Anthony.
Thanks, Josh. Great to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm super excited about AVS and all of the hyperscaler, hypervisor offerings that VMware have and the whole multi-cloud suite. Really happy to be able to dive into a specific solution such as AVS. So maybe you can give us a quick intro of yourself, what you do at VMware, and then we'll dive into some of the values of the offering.
Sure, yeah. So my role is I'm a cloud solution architect within the Australia and New Zealand team. I look after helping customers architect solutions for Azure VMware Solution. Obviously, it's a Microsoft first-party service, so we're here to help with certainly the VMware parts, but also to assist with customers for planning migration and using the VMware tools to accelerate cloud migration.
Yeah, fantastic. I think the thing that surprised me about these offerings when I initially looked at them a while ago was just how much value there is from a business perspective. So I think that's one of the things that we'll be focusing on today. So maybe you can take us through some of the advantages of the enterprise hybrid multi-cloud solution with AVS.
Sure. Well, I think probably a good place to start is just really around hybrid and multi-cloud. So if you have a look at this slide, I guess it really just talks to the fact that VMware have looked to market data, industry data to understand where our customers are intending to move in terms of hybrid and multi-cloud. And we're finding that 87% of organizations are really focused on multi-cloud. And I think a lot of this was happening when individual business units were, engaging in shadow IT, using their credit cards to buy Salesforce over here or some other cloud over there, and really decentralize a lot of the control around IT. And I guess that was driven by really just the needs of the business to be using multiple services from multiple providers. So look, 80% of enterprises now deploy apps to hybrid cloud, and really VMware is, well established as being a leader in the multi-cloud space by being able to take advantage of running VMware within multiple clouds as well as on-premise at the same time. So I guess really there's compelling business advantages associated with that with multi-cloud, and we'll talk a lot about that today, and hopefully talk about some of the value that's behind that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, on the right-hand side, we see the reasons for using multiple clouds. The top one is flexibility. So, from a technical perspective, obviously, we've got different technical offerings in those native offerings. But from a business perspective, it really comes down to choosing the right commercial partner for companies. And obviously, if one is more economical than the other, the ability to move without the refactoring project and without the huge delays and having infrastructure in two environments for extended periods while that happens. So I think flexibility is obviously it's 49% on this chart, but I would say had I not seen this chart, I would have put it somewhere near the top as well. Is that what you're seeing with the customers in the region?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess really there's VMware offers you choice. And really, it's up to you where you want to run your applications with the technologies that we've got to offer. There's some applications that it makes sense to run on, VMware's cloud with a particular hyperscaler, and there's other reasons why you would, run applications on premises. And by using technologies like HDX, we can easily move workloads between those environments to develop cross-cloud services and allow you the ability to not just run and migrate workloads and applications into a particular destination, but to move them at some point in time if that's really what's required.
Yeah, exactly. I think the ability to move in a timely manner is a key value, because in the past, to move from one place to another was a significant project all on its own. And once we have this enabled, we can do it pretty much anytime we like, within reason, of course. But I think flexibility is fantastic. And the next one on the list actually is probably one of my favorite topics, business continuity and disaster recovery, because I think this is probably an area where people think they have BCDR and they think they can recover in a timely manner. But when it actually comes to that disaster, it's proven not to be the case. And I think having a standard platform across on a hyperscaler or potentially on multiple hyperscalers means that you can actually do that with a high degree of confidence. So I'm guessing that's probably one of your most popular use cases. Certainly what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I think just echoing what you're saying, this can fall under the banner of consistency. So we're not just talking about consistency with the tooling, which you do get with VMware. Obviously, if you're running your workloads on a particular hyperscaler on VMware solution of choice, then the tools will be the same. But really being able to have the same stack living underneath your workloads when you bring them up in the event of a disaster is key to guaranteeing that everything's going to work exactly as it did in your production site.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the things that's quite common as well is the data center extension use case. And I think this is where this third point really comes in, is when we've moved some apps or whether we've failed over to one of the hyperscalers on AVS, we've got access to those native services. So our virtual machines are sitting alongside those services in a low latency environment, and we can benefit from those quite quickly and easily. So when people are talking about app modernization, that the first step is not refactoring. Right? We've already moved the workload there as is, and then we can start creating new workloads, and they can either live natively or they can live on top of something like Tanzu. So I think there's lots of choice there for customers, and it comes back to that flexibility, which is obviously top of the list, is having choice.
Yeah, I think the flexibility is overarching here. Not just solutions like Site Recovery Manager are available for disaster and backup, but a whole range of other solutions are available within public cloud. And so sometimes when customers are looking to leverage AVS for, say, production workloads, then having access to a range of other cloud services available there that may offer, different cost points is certainly an advantage. But just looking to VMware's technology, Site Recovery Manager is available to use AVS as a backup or a disaster recovery site for your on-premise environment, but you can also run it between regions within AVS as well, or Azure, and that gives you the ability to have disaster recovery from one region to another with very low recovery point objective and recovery time objective as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fourth point here on performance as well is quite interesting. A lot of customers have got, say, 2 or 3, 4-year-old hardware on premises, whether it's a managed service or they look after it themselves. Then if they go to something like AVS, it's newer hardware. Usually it's an optimal environment because it's deployed fresh for every customer and in an automated manner. So simply moving the workload into AVS is likely to give customers equal or better performance. Well, it's definitely going to be equal, but more than likely it'll give them a performance benefit simply by moving the workload. And also the next part that I find really interesting is, let's say we've moved to AVS today, we've got some improvement, things are running really well, and then a new node type is released in 12 months or 18 months, 2 years, whatever it is. We're able to then standardize or stand up a new environment on those nodes, move the workload across and decommission the older generation hardware without downtime. And then we've got further performance improvements from the environment with minimal effort. So I think it's not just the day one performance, which is going to be better in most cases. It's over the life of the solution. It's much easier to refresh to faster hardware or simply to scale that cluster to support better performance. Even if there's not more hardware or newer hardware, you can scale more hardware if need be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one other point there is that you're off that CapEx cycle of putting your hand out to the business to get some budget to go ahead with doing a refresh on premises, which is the typical case. But then, as those new nodes become available in AVS, it's very rapid to spin them up, bring your new environment up and migrate, with zero downtime into that environment. Just on that concept about scalability and elasticity, really having the ability to have mixed, clusters with mixed reserved instance agreements in place is certainly powerful as well. So within a cluster, you can have, say you want to have your base 3 nodes under a 3-year ROI, and I'm using small numbers here for an example, but maybe I want 1 year for a couple of extra nodes and then pay go for seasonal variations in my workload and capacity requirements. So you can mix and match within, as small as the cluster model. But certainly there's not many on-prem arrangements where you can return the hardware the next day if it's more than what you need. And that just allows you to optimize the amount of capacity that you're using, which typically if a customer's running an on-prem environment, they need to have that overhead available. And, even things like having spares available should they have a failure to swap in. And, they're obviously available out of a pool within AVS.
Yeah, and I think the BCDR piece that you've sort of touched on there is if we have a failure and it's on-prem, then there's work involved with restoring that environment back to a resilient state. It's usually get the hardware out, get it off to the vendor, get the spare in, install it, configure it, make sure it works. Hopefully it's not a dead on arrival, which is happens more often than we'd all like to admit with warranty spares. All of that complexity goes away and the hardware is added back to the environment. The restoration and the self-heal can be completed in a timely manner, and we're back to that resilient state where we can tolerate subsequent failures as well. So it's not like in the old days where if you have a failure, you're at risk for a day or two or a week or however long it is. And poor people like me back in the day would have to run to the data center to get it fixed straight away.
Early morning phone call and you jump in the car and go and fix the problem. But in most cases, those sorts of node issues would be, remediated in an automated fashion, and you'll get a notification that happened, but certainly doesn't involve a truck roll and much less pain for operations teams. So I think this is something that we've talked about probably before, but it frees you up having Microsoft looking after all of those day 2 operations to focus on things that are of more value to your business. And one other thing I would say there is just around that application or that infrastructure modernization, but also the operations modernization. So customers going from doing things like maintaining that physical infrastructure and the hardware through to moving to a model which is more DevOps, DevSecOps, focusing on operations as an automation process rather than focusing on the manual tasks that have traditionally been required.
Yeah, the old saying is we're focusing on keeping the lights on instead of innovation. So, yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge value. So, maybe we can jump in. We might jump to the sources of savings from AVS actually, because I think it ties in a bit better. Because one of the things I really like is when we have our sysadmins focusing on infrastructure. As much as we've all enjoyed doing that, I came from a very technical background, and that can be fun at times. But it's not really delivering great value when someone's paying me a salary just to keep the lights on. So, what I certainly experienced in my career was when I started moving up the stack and looking at architecture and things like that, is the value of my role increased a lot, both to the business and obviously what I was remunerated as well. So sysadmins are not being replaced or gotten rid of. Their role is just evolving. So instead of that lower value work that they're paid, not that well for, unfortunately, we can actually, get a benefit both for the organization and the employee by moving to something like AVS, because we're no longer training them on infrastructure management. We're training them at the architecture level or the application layer or focusing on security. And like you say, obviously operations is focusing at a different layer now, which is incredibly important, I think. Otherwise, we become static in our roles and, just too low a value.
Yeah, I guess doing things at scale is always going to introduce economies of scale. And certainly the other part of that is just the efficiencies in, running your workloads on a platform like AVS in a hyperscaler environment is going to mean that there's less tasks that are involved with maintaining that infrastructure, patching the VMware layers, for example. So all of that is taken care of with AVS by Microsoft, and really it's the customer's responsibility and opportunity to manage from the guest OS up. And that means that you get a situation where you still have the control over the applications running on top, but none of the responsibility for anything that doesn't add value to your business, basically.
Yeah, so I think the second point here is reducing the sysadmin time for managing that infrastructure. So freeing them up to do something that's innovative and more valuable. And the third point there, avoiding hardware and data center refreshes. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with customers and their problem is actually very easy to solve from a technical perspective, or even an architectural perspective. But the implementation of that solution has to jump through so much red tape and so many organizational boundaries and change windows and all these things that a simple fix takes weeks or months or even longer. Whereas in AVS, all of that's eliminated for you, so you don't have to worry about those pieces.
Yeah, one interesting thing I see there, Josh, is customers who may have fallen behind in terms of the VMware software versions that they're running on premises. And this is kind of where having hybrid cloud extension or HCX running between their on-premise environment and AVS allows them to do that upgrade as part of their migration. And so where they may be running older hardware that's not compatible with later versions, and effectively they've restricted in terms of what their options are, this allows them to modernize onto AVS, but to get off that old kit in a very efficient way. And in some cases, AVS can even offer an opportunity to have a swing kit to do an on-prem refresh where you've got somewhere to put your workloads while you replace your on-premise infrastructure anyway.
Mm. Yeah, definitely. And skipping a few steps along the way and getting straight to an optimal infrastructure is certainly valuable. The last thing you want to have to do is a hop, step, and a jump approach to getting to an outcome. As many of those steps that we can eliminate, the quicker we can do it, the lower the cost and the better the quality of the outcome.
Absolutely.
And on the downtime piece, obviously, if we have an outage for some reason and we don't have a good business continuity structure in place, then standing up an environment in AVS can be done quite quickly. And then obviously the data population is probably the slowest part of that recovery if you didn't already precede the data. But at least the infrastructure is there ready to go. So I think even for customers who have been hit by something unexpected, they can recover in a much more timely manner than having to find somewhere to restore it to or get new kit and things like that.
Yeah, I guess the other avoided downtime is the migration downtime, right? So, versus if you were going to say migrate onto a hypervisor of said hyperscaler, then there's often some conversion process involved. Some of your workloads may not be compatible with that platform. Maybe you need to make changes to those applications to move them to a public cloud. But with HCX, we can do a zero downtime migration, extend layer 2. It provides a whole migration strategy rather than just a tool that will move workloads. And so we see customers moving literally hundreds of workloads at once using the different migration capabilities of HCX. So whether that be replication-assisted vMotion or bulk migration, one-by-one vMotion even. There's a range of possibilities there, but really where we see the value is just being able to untangle some of that complexity that exists on premises and have a structured approach to moving into the cloud, which has minimum influence on not just the applications in terms of downtime, but the performance of them as well.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that's a perfect time to switch to how complicated cloud migrations can be. And if we're doing a native cloud migration and we are doing that refactoring piece, there's a lot of knowledge that an organization needs to acquire for that specific cloud provider. Even if it is a great end result, going to an AWS native or an Azure native solution does require a lot of knowledge, training, skill set change, and refactoring of workloads and things like this. So I think avoiding that allows us to get to a good outcome on a public cloud in a much shorter time frame, and obviously at lower cost and at lower risk. So avoiding that complexity, but still getting well, arguably a better result actually, is, very attractive to me.
Frozen.
Technical difficulties insert here. That's all right. So, yeah, I think, one of the things with AVS though is, if we do the planning correctly, and this has been consistent with other people I've talked to about these type of offerings, is in the planning phase, making sure we've got our ducks in a row day one allows us to make sure we get that result that we expect. And it's not that difficult. Obviously, for customers out there wanting to do it, engage your trusted VMware partner, whether it's my team or whoever else to do that work. And then, use HCX and use those benefits of these tools that are there to make our lives easier. And we can do bulk migrations and things like that. So, lots of valuable tools there for customers to leverage. And as far as cloud migrations being complex, there's complexity there, but we can minimize it by using one of these standard offerings. So, Anthony, what do you think some of the key benefits are specifically to the Azure offering?
Well, great question. I guess really where AVS is a very attractive solution for a lot of our customers is really where they're running a lot of Microsoft workloads on premises. And this is where, whether you're running just Windows itself or whether you're running things like SQL, there's definitely licensing benefits that are available to you when you move to Azure VMware Solution. So two big ones, and this is where I have a lot of conversations with customers, is around extended security updates and Azure Hybrid Use benefit. So extended security updates, we have, basically free updates for Windows Server 2012 and 2008 and SQL Server 2012 and 2008. The 2008 will end later this year, but 2012 will certainly go on beyond that. And really, we've got customers that this can literally mean up to $1 million for them in paying for those updates on premises. And it really also gives them the opportunity to move on to not just a newer platform, but a good place to do those upgrades where they may not have been confident to do that on premises as well. And even take advantage of public cloud services, or maybe they've got long-term plans to move to things like SQL managed instances. So definitely a major saving there. And the other one is around Azure Hybrid Use benefit, where you could look at that as being a bring your own licensing arrangement with AVS. So provided you've got software assurance on those workloads, you can migrate those workloads into AVS and there's no need to relicense. That works a little bit different to how Azure Hybrid Use benefit works within public cloud, or Azure VMs. In that case, you get some discount for the larger VMs, so those that have more than 8 virtual CPUs. Mm-hmm. And so really what you're getting is a discount in Azure VMs where AVS provides the ability to bring that licensing across into AVS, and that's for SQL and Windows Server as well.
Yeah, fantastic. So again, trying to standardize whether it's cloud native or on AVS, I think just keeps things as simple as possible. So why don't we jump in that case to some of the efficiencies in running in AVS? Because I think this is an area where people, I guess, don't understand how valuable it is to have the hypervisor layer sitting on top of the hyperscaler. It's one of my favorite things to talk about because not only is it a great technical outcome, it's a great commercial outcome. So whether I'm talking to a sysadmin or an architect, or I'm talking to the C-suite, they really appreciate the fact that they can get some economies from doing something like this. All right, so I think this slide's a really good one, and one of my favorite topics to discuss is the efficiency of having the hypervisor on the hyperscaler. So if we look on the right-hand side, we've got effectively what native instances look like, whether it's on Azure or another one of the hyperscalers. And we've got virtual machine t-shirt sizes. Some of them are oversized, some of them are undersized, some of them are correctly sized, but there's a lot of waste in there. So cloud waste is a term I like to use a lot. And we can see on the right-hand side, there's plenty of waste in those virtual machines. And you're paying per instance, which to me is sort of like paying for a physical server. You're not getting the benefits of virtualization. So when we look to the left on the pooled side, this is really what AVS is all about, and virtualization in general, which is we're making really efficient use of the resources, which come obviously in the form of an ESX host in AVS. And, we might be 80 or 90% utilized of the underlying hardware, and we're benefiting from all the usual virtualization features of CPU overcommitment and obviously the storage efficiency layers with vSAN as well. So I really like to talk to people about the native cloud is like a physical server, whereas the hypervisor plus hyperscaler solutions are more like just virtualization. You've got all these benefits there. So yeah, I really love this slide.
You can kind of AVS and that pooled model almost is like cloud for infrastructure guys. Gives you the benefit. Maybe you're running some test dev applications there that your performance may not be an issue at that time. So you can overcommit as much as you want or as little as you want, depending on what applications you're running there and what level of overcommit is suitable for that. For instance, the benefits of things like thin provisioning and dedupe compression, all still, they're still your benefits. You're not paying for as much stuff that you may not need in many cases. And that model on the left is really what made VMware successful over many years, which was, efficiencies and being able to drive optimization and lower costs through, pooling resources and sharing resources across infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think thin provisioning is an undervalued feature because as we see on the right-hand side, we've got these VMs that are allocated 100 gig or a terabyte or whatever it is, and sometimes they're used, sometimes they're not. You've got to have that free space allocated for machines and operating systems to work, whereas on the left-hand side, the thin provisioning you're not paying for. And if you're running low on space, cool. It's very quick and easy to add that resource. Whereas if you're on the right-hand side and you're running out of space on a disk, you've got to expand individual disks, and capacity management becomes a per instance operational overhead, which is a higher burden than managing it at a data store layer, which obviously virtual SAN is just giving you a big data store of resources, have large thin provision disks, and you're good to go. So this is just making life simple for the sysadmin, and it's also economically a great solution. So I think anyone who's got cloud native instances can actually benefit, even if they're modernized the apps already. If you bring them back to AVS, you're likely to get a commercial saving. And the benefit of these hosts as well is they're NVMe storage. So the storage performance in a lot of cases is going to increase because on the right-hand side with native instances, we're having to choose storage tiers for each workload. Whereas on the left, we've got this, this fast tier 0 almost tier of storage where all the machines can benefit from. And the performance, obviously, of something like virtual SAN, vSAN over the years has improved so much that mission-critical apps are very suitable for that kind of architecture.
Absolutely. Look, one other thing I would add to that is that we do have multiple SKUs available. So there is still an AV36, which was our first node that was available with AVS, and that's SSD for the capacity. NVMe, as you say, with the 36P and even a larger AV52, and we'll see more nodes coming as well, certainly in terms of capacity and performance. One other thing I would add to what you're saying there is just the ability to, bring workloads onto AVS, and then, maybe you've transformed those into another application, or maybe you want to move them back on-prem and move some different ones in. It's the ability to commit to the resource as opposed to committing to those individual VMs, and that can actually provide additional flexibility. And not to say that Azure VMs or a public cloud IaaS offering may be the right choice for some workloads, but we tend to find that a lot of our customers who are used to running that pooled model on premises, this is the kind of efficiencies and savings that they will want to achieve and expect in the cloud as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing I've found really valuable for customers over many years is trying to create a standard platform where all their workloads can run in one environment. It might be multiple clusters, but effectively it's one standard platform. Whereas a lot of the time we become fragmented and we have a silo for certain applications and a silo for something else, or a silo in the cloud. These hyperscaler hypervisor model solutions like AVS kind of eliminate that. We can run cloud native stuff on AVS in Azure alongside our legacy apps or new virtual machines, and get that pooled economy of scale. And the other thing I think, which is very important, is if we've got an environment, let's say on the left, where everything's pooled and it's optimal today and the performance requirements grow over time, we don't have to consider the instance type or change the t-shirt size. We can add hosts to that cluster, and straight away we can improve the performance of that environment because the CPU overcommitment has come down for the whole cluster. DRS is going to do its magic, as it's done now for 20 years or something, very well. So we can actually resolve performance bottlenecks very quickly and easily, and usually without having to involve the application team. So if there's an emergency, we can effectively provision a few hosts within, say, 45 minutes to an hour. They're provisioned and working, and we've mitigated that issue. And then if there is actually an application issue that also needs to be addressed, you've now got the underlying hardware to be able to do your testing or do your changes and not impact the rest of production. So I think risk mitigation, I think improving performance, there's just so many ways to achieve business outcomes with this solution. It's very attractive. And
agreed. Or add additional clusters, which is fairly simple as well. So we can have up to 12 clusters within a SDDC deployment, up to 96 nodes within that, and 16 hosts within any individual cluster. But there's not a lot of solutions where you can just pay for infrastructure on tap, really. And this is a simple way to do that outside of committing to individual VMs. And then there's also just that consistency of using the same tools that many who are used to managing on-prem infrastructure and VMware are used to using. So whether it be vCenter or NSX Manager, or even ARIA Operations is available. That whole suite.
Yeah, keeping things consistent and so everyone's familiar with it, and there's no retooling required.
Retraining.
No retraining, retooling, any of that. So, definitely it's a huge advantage. So AVS, obviously, it's got plenty of technical benefits. We've talked about some of the business benefits. Maybe we'll dive into some TCO numbers. So if you can give us a bit of a rundown, if we're comparing an on-premises solution versus native cloud versus AVS, where do things sort of stack up in your experience?
So as you can see in this slide, certainly AVS often works out to be, not in all cases, but a majority of cases works out to be considerably less expensive than running on-premises. We'll often see customers that are going from, much lower performance, older hardware, consumes more power, is worse for the environment in terms of CO2 production and uses more space. So it's not just those things, but then more server infrastructure also requires more effort to maintain it as well, and more nodes to patch, etc. By modernizing onto newer infrastructure, we're definitely looking at better performance cores, more efficient cores, more efficient hardware in general, and that modernization process will often result in fewer nodes and better cost performance as well. When you compare against migration to public cloud versus AVS, as you can see in this diagram, the migration costs can be quite considerable, and a lot of that comes from the effort that's required to refactor. Some applications might not be suitable for migration, while others may be more suitable and can be moved much easier. But certainly the ability of HCX to migrate with zero downtime onto AVS is a major factor that makes AVS less expensive than moving to an IaaS solution with a hyperscaler in many cases. And the other part,
the cost, I think, is probably lower than what I would expect. In fact, refactoring, I feel like in my experience, the cost of a project to refactor is probably only 50% technical. The organizational change required and the time it takes to do that, and the project management and all these different steps, that's an enormously expensive time from both the cost perspective, but also the time perspective. So you're distracting your staff doing this refactoring and migration from actually innovating. You're really just trying to do a like-for-like refresh, which in my opinion is one of the lowest value tasks we do in IT, is people do like-for-like. And as you can see in the public cloud, that's a massive part of the cost. So if we're picking up our environment and we're putting it in AVS, even though you might say it's like for like, I'd argue it's actually much better than like for like. But if the argument is it's like for like because it's VMware to VMware, we're eliminating all of that delay in getting to that outcome. And I think that alone pays for the solution for a lot of larger organizations who are, not as dynamic as what they would like to be.
Absolutely. I think there's the term the get out of jail free card. We've got customers that come to us that are on a journey that there's maybe taking longer than what they ever expected. And that can be literally down to organizational processes as an example as well. But they will literally pivot to AVS as a means to accelerate their journey to the cloud. And having the benefit of VMware's tools and our capabilities in terms of these solutions, moving to AVS, and then from there, if they choose to modernize and take advantage of public cloud services, they can, or they can modernize directly on AVS as well, using things like Tanzu and manage all of that with cloud management through VMware as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, obviously here we can see on premises, there's a lot of things we want to get rid of in terms of management here, the facilities. Most people's facilities aren't up to scratch to start with, and they're expensive to manage. So eliminating that piece, I think, is a godsend for most CIOs. That's just something they want to get off their plate. The labor piece, obviously, if you can reduce the hands and feet type labor, the lower value stuff, and focus on the high value tasks, that's a huge value as well. And just looking after hardware in general. Obviously on premises, there's a big piece there. More than half appears to be just managing tin. And certainly not a task that people get paid well to do. So if you're a sysadmin just looking after the infrastructure, you're quite beneficial if you get your employer to move to AVS or something similar, because you can then focus on high value tasks and elevate your own career. So I think it's a
absolutely. The other thing that's not in this diagram is just around security. So if you were to try and get a tenth of the compliance that you have when you're in a public cloud like Azure, or on a hyperscaler like Azure, it's completely unachievable for most organizations in terms of running their own environment. Whereas all of that comes, I'm not going to say for nothing, but it is not factored into a lot of these costs. And so if you do have serious commitments around security and requirements, then moving to something like AVS is going to definitely tick a whole bunch of boxes there and ensure that it's a more secure environment than what you're actually running on premises, which always isn't people's expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the fact that, Microsoft and VMware have gone to the effort of automating the deployment of these SDDCs so that every time you deploy a new one, it's standard, it's a repeatable model, you know exactly what you're getting, and you know exactly where the responsibility lies between Microsoft and VMware and the customer. I think there's a huge value there. Why don't we jump in and just show a quick overview of what the solution looks like on-prem versus in AVS, because I think people will be surprised the similarities which we want to be there, and also the things that we don't need to worry about now once we've moved to AVS. This chart we're going to have a look at, I think is a great visual because what we see is all the bits we really want and we know and love and want to use, but without all the complexity. So I guess you can talk to this better than I can. So.
Yeah, sure. This slide is just really going through, I guess, the overarching principle here is around risk. So there's multiple risk factors here. One would be around just the technical risk associated with the on-prem environment, right? And technical debt. It's a term that gets used often as well, obviously. And so in your traditional on-prem environment, you've got not just the costs of your physical infrastructure, and so maybe you've got some rack space in a co-location facility. You've got the power costs. Maybe you're paying for cross connects. Then often customers are moving off a traditional 3-tier architecture in their on-prem or private cloud outside of a hyperscaler. That's going to include storage engineers running part of that platform traditionally, or maybe it's converged with network switching in there. You've got the cost of the compute itself. You've got all of the networking that's required to stitch all of that together, whether it be routers, switches, and firewalls, etc., load balancers, and then you've got your software that would typically run on top of that, and so hypervisor up. Then you've got to secure all of that, and often that will be multiple points of management in terms of making all of that work together, and then having any level of comfort around the fact that all of that is going to provide a very secure solution lies with you and your team in most instances, or you outsource that to someone else. So there's a lot of complexity there. Obviously, technically, you've got the financial complexity associated with, you've got contracts ending at different times. There may be special deal on a renewal with this particular vendor before this point in time. You've got literally different refresh periods on different bits of kit. So making all of that, work from a financial standpoint, where you've got, CapEx commitments quite frequently at different refresh cycles, is another challenge. And
your cost. So it's a very simple model is so important. And as an architect, when a customer says to me, oh, we've just renewed our SAN, or we've just renewed our, compute hardware, what can we do? And I'm given a constraint like that. Of course, we can always work around these situations, but we end up making compromises, which is delaying where we want to get to. So I think collapsing that model into a per node cost, and like you say, not having all these different contracts ending at different times and warranties and support and all this nonsense to worry about is a huge advantage. So anyone who's got those challenges today, where one of the storage vendors is ringing them up for a renewal, or their hardware supplier is calling them up, the moment you say yes to one of those, right, you're delaying your potential move into one of these solutions where you eliminate a lot of that complexity and package it all up into a simple per node cost. I think all these negotiations around ELAs are complicated, they're time consuming, and they're expensive. A per node cost is something we can budget for very easily. And of course, we lock in some of it for 1 or 3 years to save a little bit of money there. And then as we go, we use PayGo if we need to burst. So I just think it's so simple, both from a commercial and an architectural perspective, that it's almost a no-brainer.
Yeah, so if you did a simple TCO comparison of what's on the left here versus what's on the right, you'd start off at, let's call it a bottom-up TCO. So you'd be looking at your data center costs, and all of these components would be different line items in that TCO comparison. On the right, you're literally going to have, what is your per node per month cost? Maybe you're paying for some additional networking, some other components that you're running within Azure, in terms of maybe you're running firewalls or third-party MVAs. There may be some other things that are there, but you've got all of that functional equivalent software that's taken care of in NSX, for example. So it includes a hell of a lot, and that can mean that when you compare the two TCOs, there's only really a couple of items in the AVS model as opposed to a full stack of costs, from the ground up for traditional on-premise, comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. So just from a budgeting perspective, it's a known quantity. Whether people think it's high value or not, it is a simple model that makes our lives easier. So
I think, and all OpEx.
And OpEx, obviously. Yeah, getting a large CapEx approved is very difficult for a lot of customers. And I guess for customers who are stuck in that 3-year refresh life cycle, you're kind of locking yourself in. If you buy something and you got to sweat it for 3 or usually a lot longer, 5 years even, then you're not getting, innovation over that time. So, AVS as well, if you've got, these AV36 nodes and then there's a new node coming out, cool, well, we can switch you over quite quickly. Whereas when you buy it on-prem, you're somewhat stuck with it. There's some models that try and make it a bit more flexible, but certainly in the cloud, it's easier. You add the hardware, stand up a new cluster, migrate the workload, and you're done. And
the overlap.
About
just having those two environments running at the same time while you're in the process of standing up your new hardware and then cutting over to it and testing and then decommissioning. And so it's often called a double mortgage.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So if it takes a large organization, say 6 to 12 months to stand up new infrastructure before they can start migrating to it, it is exactly that. It's a double mortgage. You're moving from one house to another, but you've got to have that time to move. And if your furniture takes a year to move, then you're paying a fortune. So
and quite often organizations leave that to very late in the piece. So the kit's getting old. Maybe there's, the occasional failure. Certainly the risk goes up quite heavily once you get to the end of that bathtub curve.
Yeah, actually what I see a lot is companies, get put in a situation, sometimes it's a lack of planning and sometimes it's just, things have happened outside their control, but where they have to make a decision to rush out of a data center. And the problem with doing that is they engage me to help them out. And I'm like, do you realize you've got all these risks and there's a laundry list of risks that I'm trying to help them mitigate to get somewhere in a very short space of time. And the chance you're going to have a seamless migration and minimal or no downtime, gets lower and lower and lower, the less planning you can do. So I think AVS just solves a lot of those challenges organizationally. I'm sure project managers really appreciate solutions like this as well. As you go into the dark, apparently the lights are not getting kept on in your environment.
The light because I'm not moving around.
Yeah, we need the sysadmin to keep the lights on in your office data center.
Yeah, at least we're energy efficient, right?
Yeah. So no, I think it's just such a simple thing. Moving to an OpEx model and having flexibility to create environments, rip them down. If there's a ransomware incident, I love this example actually. Just stand up a net new SDDC, verify your backup is not compromised, and then restore it into a net new environment, and then blow away the one that was compromised. So you've got no risk of being re-compromised. Or you've minimized the risk of being re-compromised at least. So just so much value here that that virtualization layer on top of the hyperscaler provides. So yeah, very exciting times. It's almost like the vMotion excitement again, in my opinion. It's like seeing the first vMotion back 20 years ago, or maybe not quite 20 years, but pretty close, to now where we can move across multi-cloud environments.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, cross-cloud services are really where we see things going. We've got probably the best, undoubtedly the best capabilities in terms of being able to move between clouds with low friction. And I think there's definitely a lot more movement to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think obviously here we're talking with an AVS focus, but broadly speaking, VMware's got so many partners who have this VMware hypervisor on a hyperscaler solution that if in a certain number of, a year, 2, 5 years, whatever, if the economics change in Azure or there's a new product offering in GCVE or AWS or whatever it is, customers have that flexibility to move, or better still, have multiple providers where they can benefit from business continuity, from economy of scale, things like that. And also just different regions around the world. Obviously, each one of the hyperscalers has different locations where they've got resources. So customers being able to utilize those, I think is a massive advantage as well.
Absolutely. Yep.
Excellent. Well, I think we've sold the hell out of AVS today. It's a great solution. I'm a huge fan, of course, but hopefully everyone's enjoyed hearing from Anthony and hearing me express my excitement for these solutions as well. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to catching up in person very soon at Explore.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks for your time.